Santan wasn't built for crying. It was a city of perfume-scented elevators, bottomless champagne, and men who wore Rolexes like they wore wedding rings, expensive, polished, and rarely faithful. From her 42nd floor penthouse window, Naledi Dlamini could see all of Johannesburg breathing beneath her, like a city that bowed to beauty. That morning, the gentle fog blurred the skyline, softening the hard steel towers that mirrored her life. She lit a candle, not out of prayer, but because it was scented like bergamot and wealth. But even as it flickered beside her, something in her gut whispered, "The glass is cracking." Vuyo Dlamini was a man who walked like a stock market line, always rising, always watched, always on edge. He wasn't born rich, but he had mined the earth like a hungry god, dragging gold and platinum from beneath the African soil until money bowed before him. In boardrooms, his voice was a verdict. At home, it was a presence you didn't question. That morning, he chewed his breakfast alone, scrambled eggs plated like art, avocado sculpted like a swan. Across the room, silence hummed louder than jazz. The butler didn't ask questions anymore. The family smiled less now. Still, everything looked perfect. Beneath the surface, their world ticked like a bomb with no countdown. Their children, Kumo and Ayanda, were continents away, documenting luxury as if it were a birthright. Their social feeds were galleries of excess, rooftop bars in Paris, infinity pools in Bali, iced champagne bottles that cost more than teachers' salaries. Naledi had stopped asking where they were. She only checked Instagram to know they were alive. Behind every glamorous post lay something quieter, something she couldn't name. But in her own eyes, when she wasn't wearing lashes, she saw it clearly. They were a family with too many windows. And no curtains. When Ayanda was born, Vuyo planted a tree in Stellenbosch. 20 years later, he couldn't remember where. But he remembered the first time she called him sir instead of daddy. It was during a photo shoot for a luxury ad she modeled in. Her eyes had sparkled, less like a child's, more like a professional trying to please. Kumo, the older brother, had always been a rebel in Gucci. His rage wasn't loud, it was sarcastic. Detached. He smoked truth like a blunt, rolled in sarcasm. They both carried their father's ambition but none of his warmth. Or maybe the warmth had expired. Naledi's mornings began with affirmations and green juice but ended in self-correction. She had created an empire from her face, the beauty brand built on flawless skin and manufactured hope. Every cream came with a promise, youth, light, radiance. But no one asked how she felt beneath it. She missed being loved for something that couldn't be packaged. Her husband loved her, yes, but sometimes like one might love a chandelier, dazzling, expensive, but never touched. Once, she found a lipstick stain on Vuyo's collar. She didn't cry. She simply ordered a new washing machine. In Santan, grief came with silk robes. Every Friday, Kumo would text the group chat, alive. Don't panic. Ayanda would heart it. Vuyo would ignore it. Naledi would delete it. That was their rhythm. Pretend normal. Move on. The Dlaminis weren't broken, just privately bleeding. Money had bought them space, mansions, islands, therapists on speed dial, but no one had touched each other in months. Their last family dinner had ended with Ayanda filming a TikTok dance while Kumo argued with the chef about meat temperatures. No one remembered the taste of the food. Only the silence. Only the moment when Vuyo stared at his phone instead of his family. The call came at 3:17 a.m. Vuyo was in Cape Town, closing a deal with European investors. His assistant knocked on his hotel door, phone trembling in hand. When he answered, a cold Swiss voice said, "Your daughter collapsed in the atelier. She's in ICU." At first, he assumed drugs, maybe exhaustion. But when the doctor explained the immune collapse, his fingers went numb. He asked to speak to her. "She can't speak, oh sir." That line repeated in his head like a curse. He called Naledi. She was already crying. Somewhere between Johannesburg and Zurich, their empire started to rust. The private jet cut through the sky like a silver dagger, but the silence inside was heavier than gravity. Naledi stared out the window, her eyes tracing the clouds. Vuyo reviewed lab reports and medical PDFs he didn't understand. Her kidneys were attacking her body. The diagnosis was brutal, rare, and aggressive. Ayanda, their blooming child, was now withering in a hospital bed thousands of miles from her home. When they arrived, the hospital suite looked like a luxury apartment. White orchids, leather couches, warm lights. But the girl on the bed looked like a stranger, sunken cheeks, tubes in her arms, her phone untouched. Kumo didn't fly in. He posted a black square and wrote, "Life's fragile." That was it. Naledi wanted to scream at him through text, but she didn't. Vuyo offered 5 million rand to anyone who could donate a matching kidney. A bidding war broke out among desperate men from Eastern Europe. But none matched. One night, a young woman came close but was rejected after a medical screening revealed a latent disease. Naledi wept behind the hospital's indoor garden. She hated hospitals. The smell of sanitized air, the rustle of nurses' shoes, it made grief feel permanent. She started forgetting what joy sounded like. They tried everything. Stem cell infusions. Gene editing trials. Eastern herbalists flown in from Limpopo. Vuyo even hired a priest, a sangoma, and a molecular biologist to visit on the same day. Nothing worked. Ayanda was sleeping. Her once glossy skin dulled to paper. She stopped requesting her skincare shipments. That scared Naledi the most. Vuyo watched her vitals more than he watched stock prices. He began missing meetings. Cancelled deals. When the chairman of Dlamini Mines called about an investor emergency, Vuyo simply whispered, "Not now." He stayed up at night reading medical journals. But not once did he pray. Ayanda's condition forced the family to live in hotel rooms near the hospital. Suites that cost her 80,000 a night but smelled like desperation. Naledi tried to maintain her routine. She posted less, wore sunglasses indoors, avoided mirrors. Sometimes she would stand outside Ayanda's room, listening to the machine's beep. Each beep was a countdown. Kumo called once. His voice was slurred. "Tell her I love her," he said. Then the line dropped. Naledi didn't call back. The world outside moved on. New trends rose. Influencers danced. Celebrities divorced. But inside that hospital, time stood still, pinned like a butterfly in a glass box. Vuyo's assistants kept forwarding emails about the company. Allegations were surfacing. Workers in Limpopo were protesting. Something about unpaid settlements. "Not now," he repeated. Not now. He didn't realize that grief doesn't pause the world, it accelerates it. And when truth smells blood, it hunts. A week later, a Swiss nurse approached gently. "She wants to see you." Vuyo rushed in. Ayanda smiled weakly. Her voice, barely audible, cracked as she said, "Sorry, Dad." He didn't understand why she apologized. But in that moment, the man who once stared down presidents broke. He sat beside her, held her hand, and silently wept. Naledi used to wear heels that announced her arrival. Now, she walked like a ghost, quiet, measured, tired. Her makeup sat unused. Her skincare boxes gathered dust in the hotel closet. Journalists emailed daily. Customers asked when the next serum line was dropping. She ignored them. Once a South African actress spotted her at a Geneva cafe and said, "You don't look like yourself." Naledi smiled politely. But inside, something cracked. She no longer knew what herself meant. Her world was facials and filters. Now it was dialysis machines and sterile gloves. Beauty, she realized, meant nothing in the face of dying light. Back in Johannesburg, her offices panicked. Brand managers tried to launch damage control. Rumors swirled that Naledi had gone mad. Some said she was divorcing Vuyo. Others claimed she'd moved to Europe permanently. None knew the truth. She was breaking, slowly, elegantly, invisibly. One night she opened her old scrapbook from her Miss South Africa days. Her handwriting looked foreign. Her dreams, too. Ayanda used to draw little hearts beside her mother's face in those pictures. Now, all Naledi saw were hollow eyes and frozen smiles. She tore out one page, kissed it, and placed it beside Ayanda's pillow. Just in case the first email leaked at 2:04 a.m., a scanned document showing falsified signatures and ignored environmental reports tied to Dlamini mines. The whistleblower was anonymous, but their message was clear. Greed is louder than grief. Within hours, social media erupted. Hashtags trended, #Dlamini Blood Gold, #Justice for Limpopo. Protesters camped outside Dlamini headquarters. Photos surfaced of dead riverbeds, children with rashes of poison soil. Vuyo tried to manage the fire, but it spread too fast. His spokesperson resigned. One board member fled to Namibia. Every news channel looked his face with the word corruption like a subtitle. While his daughter faded in silence, his empire screamed. Naledi's skincare brand was next. Influencers began returning products. A popular YouTuber called her a fraud in a facial. The company's shares plummeted. Retail stores pulled her items from the shelves. And then came the stories, workers from her production lab claiming they hadn't been paid in weeks. One blog exposed expired ingredients in her luxury creams. Naledi didn't deny it. She didn't respond. Instead, she closed her laptop and sat on the floor of her hotel bathroom for hours, just breathing. Just existing. Her daughter was dying. The world could wait. Let them cancel her. She had already cancelled herself. Kumo, once beloved for his luxury vlogs, became a meme. Old videos resurfaced of him mocking township kids, flashing diamond grills, tossing our 100 notes in clubs. Sponsors dropped him. Brand deals vanished. He posted cryptic stories, he deleted them, posted again. His followers split, some defended, others mocked. His page became a war zone of emojis and insults. He turned off his comments. Then his phone. Then his sense of direction. He moved into a villa in Camps Bay with strangers who introduced him to things even rehab couldn't name. His name trended again, this time with the phrase, rich, rude, and rotten. Vuyo's boardroom was now a battlefield. Investors pulled out. Projects stalled. Auditors arrived with suitcases. His voice lost its power. His eyes lost sleep. In Zurich, Ayanda's condition worsened. Her fingers turned blue. Her breathing shallowed. Naledi begged for a miracle. Vuyo offered more money. A Swiss nurse whispered, "She's holding on for you." But neither parent knew what to say. Their conversations with Ayanda were now mostly to machines. One evening, Vuyo missed a press conference meant to clear his name. Instead, he sat by his daughter's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall, slower and slower. Silence became the answer. The Santan mansion grew quiet. The house staff shrank. The chef quit. The accountant disappeared, he last seen boarding a flight to Mauritius. The wine deliveries stopped. The security doubled. The estate gates buzzed less with VIPs and more with journalists. Vuyo's sister sent a voice note begging him to step back and heal. He deleted it. Every room in their house echoed like a museum, beautiful, curated, and lifeless. Naledi tried to pack Ayanda's things. She folded her daughter's silk pajamas and cried into them. Her daughter's scent lingered like a whisper, vanilla lotion and soft dreams. That scent was beginning to fade. In Zurich, snowflakes danced outside the hospital window like little souls falling. Ayanda hadn't opened her eyes in 3 days. The doctor said she was slipping into organ shutdown. Vuyo refused to believe it. He stood beside her, a suit wrinkled, beard untrimmed, eyes bloodshot. Naledi sat in the corner, her hands trembling. A priest walked in quietly. Naledi shook her head. Not yet. Not now. But time doesn't wait for titles. At 6:42 p.m., Ayanda's monitor flatlined. A nurse screamed. A machine was switched off. And Vuyo, the man who could move stock markets, dropped to his knees. Not from shock, but from surrender. The hospital suite went silent except for Naledi's soft, breaking sobs. Vuyo held his daughter's cold hand. He traced the lines on her palm as if trying to rewrite them. He whispered, "I'm sorry," though he wasn't sure for what. For being late. For being distant. For thinking money was enough. Ayanda's eyes never opened again. But a tear had slid down her cheek, as if she knew. As if she forgave him. Outside, the city glowed with festive lights. Inside, the billionaire family crumbled in silence. That night, Vuyo didn't eat. Naledi didn't sleep. And a golden child became memory. They flew Ayanda's body home in a private jet she never got to enjoy. The casket was white with rose gold trim. Custom made. It still didn't feel enough. At the tarmac, journalists waited behind barricades. Cameras flashed. Naledi wore sunglasses. Vuyo wore pain. Back in Santan, the mansion was prepared for the funeral. Hundreds of lilies were ordered. Velvet chairs arranged. A choir flown in from Soweto rehearsed harmonies. But the walls of the house still held her laughter, faint and fleeting. In her pink-themed bedroom, her diary lay open to the last page. It read, "Even stars burn out. But I hope my light meant something." The sky wept politely on the morning of Ayanda's funeral, just a drizzle, soft enough to smear mascara but not soak the lace umbrellas of the Santan elite. Black Bentleys lined the streets like mourners in uniform. Dignitaries shook hands. Celebrities whispered condolences. But grief isn't public. It's personal. The choir sang in Zulu, their harmonies a cry for lost futures. Naledi stood still, clutching Ayanda's childhood scarf in her fist. Vuyo gave a eulogy that cracked midway. When the casket was lowered, his knees buckled. It wasn't the weight of death, it was the weight of love that had arrived too late. Inside the mansion, the chandeliers flickered as guests filled the marble halls with synthetic sympathy. Waiters served canapes no one touched. The air smelled of lilies and false comfort. Naledi excused herself midway through pleasantries and climbed the staircase in silence. In Ayanda's room, everything was untouched. The pink throw pillows, the sketchbooks, the half-used perfume bottle. She lay on the bed like she had so many times, but this time, she sobbed. Not loud. Just long. Downstairs, Vuyo shook hands like a man in autopilot. But every voice felt like static. Every face, a stranger. He no longer belonged to this world. Later that night, after the last car drove away and the last wine glass was cleared, Vuyo wandered into the wine cellar and locked the door behind him. He didn't drink. He just sat there, breathing in the darkness. It reminded him of a mine shaft, cold, tight, humbling. Above him, life moved. But he stayed below. Naledi lay awake in bed, replaying Ayanda's laughter from old videos on her phone. Her thumb trembled. Her heart ached. Her empire was still standing, but her spirit was shattered. And somewhere in Cape Town, Kumo never showed up at all. He hadn't even called. The Santan mansion aged overnight. Flowers wilted in their crystal vases. The chef never returned. The household staff moved with silent footsteps. No one played music anymore. Ayanda's door remained closed, like a sacred tomb. Naledi stopped wearing heels. She walked barefoot through the halls like a woman mourning more than a child, mourning a life once full. Vuyo took to his study, staring at spreadsheets he never read. The empire still ticked. But the heartbeat behind it had stopped. No more gala invitations. No more magazine covers. Just silence. Deep. Swallowing. The kind that lives in walls and speaks in echoes. Kumo's name was never spoken. Not because they didn't care, but because it had too much. He had vanished without explanation, leaving only Instagram stories that hinted at excess, regret, and confusion. He was lost, not to drugs, not to alcohol, but to guilt. Survivor's guilt. He had been too busy chasing clout to say goodbye. He watched Ayanda's funeral live stream from a hotel bed in Sea Point, tears falling into a champagne glass he didn't remember ordering. A girl he didn't know lay beside him, scrolling through TikTok. He left without saying a word. Cape Town wasn't a retreat anymore. It was exile. Naledi visited Ayanda's grave alone 3 weeks after the funeral. The headstone had been carved from rose quartz, her favorite crystal. On it, just her name and a sun symbol she used to draw. No dates. No titles. Just Ayanda. The girl. The dream. The light. Naledi brought the perfume Ayanda once loved and sprayed it into the air. It smelled like memories. She knelt by the grave and whispered things no one would hear. Not even God. When she rose, her knees cracked, but her resolve sharpened. She couldn't save her daughter. But maybe she could save herself. Weeks turned to months. The tabloids moved on. New scandals rose. The Dlaminis family faded into whispers. Vuyo stopped attending board meetings. Naledi stopped posting. The mansion's curtains stayed drawn. Their world, once watched, envied, imitated, became a cautionary tale. Vuyo rarely left his study. When he did, he wandered barefoot into Ayanda's room, tracing the books on her shelf. He found her childhood drawing, one of a smiling family with stars above their heads. His finger trembled as he touched it. The wealth he had built now felt like a wall that separated him from everything real. Every asset became a ghost. Naledi received letters from fans who still loved her brand. But she never replied. Her PR team begged her to stage a comeback. A rebrand. Rise like a phoenix, one in turn suggested. She almost laughed. There were no flames left. Just ash. One day, she walked into her skincare lab and announced. The building smelled of sterilized ambition. The staff froze. Naledi walked through the halls, her heels echoing for the first time in months. She entered the testing room, saw the mirrors, the products, the machines. And then she did something unexpected, she walked out. Quietly. She never returned again. One evening, Vuyo stood outside the closed gates of the Limpopo mine. Alone. No security. No media. Just a billionaire staring at the land that made him rich and hated. Protest banners still hung on the fence. Pay what you owe. Water before wealth. He entered anyway. The local foreman didn't recognize him at first. When he did, his jaw clenched. Vuyo didn't argue. He asked for a tour. No press. No drama. Just eyes that wanted to see what they had ignored for years. The tour lasted 2 hours. By the end, Vuyo was silent. His hands shook. He had seen too much. Kumo ended up in a rehab facility tucked away in the winelands, paid for by an anonymous donation, though everyone knew who sent it. He arrived high, arrogant, angry. The therapists didn't flinch. They let him talk until he ran out of words. In group therapy, he finally admitted it, I didn't say goodbye. I was scared. That night, he cried for 5 hours. No one judged him. Guilt is universal. He began painting. Badly at first, then beautifully. He drew Ayanda over and over, each version brighter, freer. He stopped checking his followers. For once, he wanted to be followed by peace. In a therapy session, Kumo was asked to write a letter to his sister. He tried. Failed. Tried again. Finally, he wrote. I was too busy pretending to matter while you were fighting to live. I should have been there. I'm sorry. He left the letter at a vineyard tree, letting the wind take it. On his 90th day in rehab, he shaved his beard, wore a clean white shirt, and walked through the vineyard with a therapist. Do you think I can go home now? He asked. The therapist smiled. Only if you're ready to meet yourself there. Kumo flew back to Johannesburg without alerting anyone. He didn't arrive in a Rolls-Royce. He took an Uber. The mansion's gate guard didn't recognize him at first. His skin was clearer, his posture gentler. He walked into the house and found it exactly as he remembered. Quiet. Gold-trimmed sadness. He climbed the stairs to Ayanda's room and sat on the floor beside her bed. Then he wept, not for her, but for the version of himself she never got to meet. The one who was finally clean. Present. Human. I'm here, he whispered. It wasn't an apology. It was a promise. While clearing Ayanda's things, Naledi found a folder hidden beneath the dresser. Inside were handwritten letters addressed to each family member. Unsent. Unopened. The one to her mother read, "Mom, your beauty saved others. I wish it had saved you too. You were always trying to glow even when you were crumbling." The one to her father, "You taught me to win. But I wish you taught me how to feel. I love you. But I don't think you ever knew me." Kumo's letter was the longest. It ended with, "You were never second best. You were just too busy being fast." Naledi sat with those letters for hours. She didn't cry. She just held them like treasures. Messages from beyond. Soft truths written in gentle ink. Vuyo refused to read his at first. Then, late one night, he sat in Ayanda's room and opened the envelope with shaking hands. Her handwriting looked strong, even while her body was weak. Her words weren't angry. They were illuminating. He read the letter 3 times. Then he placed it beneath her pillow, kissed the air, and whispered, "Thank you." It was the first time he'd said anything aloud in days. One morning, Naledi stood in front of her vanity mirror for the first time in months. The face looking back wasn't camera ready. Her eyes were swollen. Her cheeks slightly sunken. Her skin, once her empire, was now her truth. She didn't reach for a concealer. Instead, she touched her cheek gently, like introducing herself to a stranger. That evening, she donated all her unsold skincare products to a women's shelter in Soweto. No media. No photos. Just quiet giving. She stayed to volunteer, no heels, no lashes. Just Naledi. Not the icon. Not the wife. Just a mother searching for meaning. The shelter staff didn't recognize her at first. But over time, they grew to know her, not through fame, but through service. She washed dishes. Braided hair. Told bedtime stories to girls who had none. One day, the little girl asked, "Why are you so kind?" Naledi smiled and replied, "Because I forgot how, then I'm remembering again." The girl hugged her. It felt more real than any award. Back home, she framed one of Ayanda's sketches, a picture of a woman planting stars. She placed it in the hallway. Every time she walked past, she whispered, "One seed at a time." Vuyo noticed the change in Naledi. She hummed again, softly, when folding towels. She started writing in a journal. Once, he caught her dancing barefoot in the kitchen while making tea. No music. Just movement. He didn't interrupt. Just watched from the shadows like a man discovering fire for the first time. He, too, had begun a ritual. Every Sunday, he drove to a park where families picnicked. He sat on a bench and watched strangers love each other. It reminded him of what he had missed. What he had traded for boardrooms. And how much poorer that trade had made him. Vuyo returned to Limpopo alone. This time, not to inspect, but to listen. He sat with local chiefs, mothers, and miners. He apologized, not as a businessman, but as a father who had lost something too. He pledged restitution. Not peer-driven donations, but real change, water purification systems, schools, clinics. He personally oversaw the signing of new worker contracts. One elderly man said, "You've become human." Vuyo smiled sadly. It took death to remember life. Before leaving, he stood at the river, once poisoned, now beginning to heal, and threw in a gold coin. Not as payment. As penance. Back in Johannesburg, he met with his board. He stepped down as CEO. The room went silent. I built this empire for the wrong reasons, he said. And I won't destroy it for the same. He nominated a younger, community-minded executive. Shareholders protested. He didn't flinch. That night, he returned home, sat with Naledi in the garden, and poured her a glass of rooibos. They didn't speak. Just held hands beneath a sky Ayanda could no longer draw, but still painted with light. Silence was no longer a wound. It was a bond. One afternoon, Vuyo found a dusty velvet box in Ayanda's drawer. Inside was a simple gold necklace with a tiny sun pendant. She had never worn it. Just kept it. He placed it around his neck and wore it beneath his shirts, close to his chest. Every heartbeat was a reminder. At work, he declined interviews. At home, he tended the garden himself. He planted sunflowers in the backyard. When they bloomed, they all leaned toward the window of Ayanda's room, as if searching for her. On the anniversary of Ayanda's death, the Dlamini mansion opened its doors, not for a gala, but for a memorial art show. They displayed her sketches, her writings, her digital designs. Friends came. Former critics came. Even strangers who had followed her silently online came. Kumo curated the exhibit. Naledi gave a small speech. Vuyo stood in the back, his eyes wet, his heart steady. This is her legacy, Naledi said. Not the glitz. Not the money. But the light she left behind. People cried. Laughed. Danced. And for the first time in a long time, the mansion was filled with life again. After the show, Kumo approached his parents in the garden. He didn't speak. Just handed them each a notebook. New chapters, the covers read. Naledi opened hers that night and began to write. I am not my brand. I am not my past. I am Naledi. I loved. I broke. I lived. Vuyo wrote one line only. Even kings must kneel to truth. They placed the books beside Ayanda's framed sketch. In that moment, the mansion no longer felt like a museum. It felt like home. Months later, the world still moved. Trends changed. News cycled. But the Dlaminis had changed too. Not in wealth, but in awareness. Vuyo walked slower. Spoke softer. Naledi smiled with her eyes. Kumo enrolled in a creative therapy course. And every Sunday, they visited Ayanda's grave not to mourn but to talk. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they sat in silence. But always, they remembered. One day, Vuyo whispered to the air, "Thank you for teaching us what money never could." A gust of wind kissed his cheek. He looked up. The sun broke through the clouds. And for once, it didn't feel heavy. That evening, as dusk settled over Santan, the mansion glowed from within, not from chandeliers or designer lights, but from something quieter. Softer. Truer. In Ayanda's room, the curtains fluttered gently. On her desk, a final note had been framed. No one knew who found it. It read. Even stars burn out. But sometimes, they leave behind a sky full of hope. And in the stillness that followed, the truth rang clear. The rich also cry. But now, they also feel. And that made all the difference.